My name is Sarah. I'm 34. I manage people for a living, which means I spend most of my days reading rooms figuring out what isn't being said, tracing the gap between what someone tells me and what's actually true. I was good at it at work. I was worse at it at home. And I didn't understand the difference until the afternoon Marcus Vance called. He's the school counselor. I knew him from the one time we'd spoken at orientation. Steady voice, careful eyes, the kind of person who chooses his words before he says them. He told me Lily was fine. Then he said, "There are some entries in her journal I think you need to see in person." I drove there telling myself it was ordinary. A falling out with a friend, maybe. The complicated social world of second grade. I was already composing the calm, patient response I'd give Lily at dinner. I was not calm when I left that office. The journal was pale yellow with a small daisy sticker on the cover. Lily had pressed it there herself. I recognized it immediately. She kept it in her backpack, carried it everywhere, said it was where she put things that were real. She was right about that part. Marcus turned to the first flagged page. The handwriting was careful and slightly oversized, the way it gets when she's concentrating hard. I read the first line. Then I read it again. And then the next 8 months rearranged themselves into something I didn't have a word for yet. Part that stayed with me longest wasn't the confrontation. It was the moment I realized Lily had been carrying something no 8-year-old should have to carry, and had been carrying it alone, in silence, because someone told her that honesty would cost her something she loved. If you've ever had to rebuild your child's trust in you after someone else spent time quietly tearing it down, or if you've had a family member who expressed their disapproval not to you, but through you drop a comment below. I read everyone. And if this story found you at the right moment, stay with me. There are more stories here that might feel like yours. I closed the journal, sat with it in my lap for a moment. And then I thought about the last 8 months. Every weekend I had thanked her. Every time I had felt relieved. Every night I had told myself Lily was safe and loved, and in good hands, and I understood, with the particular clarity of someone who has just made a very expensive mistake, that I hadn't been reading the room at all. I had been reading the room she wanted me to see. The question that came next wasn't how long it had been happening. It was, what else didn't I know? The call came at 2:47 in the afternoon. Sarah knew the time because she had just finished her third meeting of the day and was looking at her calendar trying to locate 30 minutes that didn't already belong to someone else. Her phone lit up on the desk beside her laptop. A number she didn't recognize. A local area code. She almost let it go to voicemail. She answered on the third ring. The voice on the other end was calm in the particular way that careful people are calm, not relaxed but deliberate. Measured. Like someone who had thought about the first sentence before dialing, he introduced himself as Marcus Vance, Lily's school counselor. He said he was calling because there were some things in Lily's journal he believed Sarah needed to see. He said it wasn't an emergency. He said Lily was fine. He said both of those things, and Sarah heard neither of them. What she heard was, journal. What she heard was, needed to see. What she heard was the particular silence that followed, a half-second pause that carried more information than anything that came before it. She closed her laptop. She told her 3 o'clock she'd have to reschedule. She didn't explain why. She picked up her bag and walked out of the building into an afternoon that looked completely ordinary. Pale sky, the smell of someone's cut grass, a neighbor's dog barking 2 streets over, and got in her car. She drove there telling herself it was nothing serious. A friendship conflict, maybe. Some exchange on the playground that had found its way into Lily's writing. Children that age processed everything through the story Sarah knew. She had read the books. She had done the work. She was still telling herself this when she pulled into the school parking lot. She was still telling herself this when the front office buzzed her through. Marcus Vance stood when she entered. He was somewhere in his early 40s, with an unhurried quality that made the small office feel steadier than it had any right to. He thanked her for coming quickly. He gestured to the chair across from his desk. He did not make small talk. He reached to the side and placed a journal on the desk between them. Pale yellow cover. A small daisy sticker near the bottom corner that Lily had pressed there herself. Sarah recognized it immediately. Lily carried that journal everywhere. She'd told Sarah once, very seriously, that it was where she kept things that were real. Marcus opened it to a page marked with a small adhesive tab. He turned it to face her. "I want you to read this yourself," he said quietly. "Take whatever time you need." Sarah leaned forward. She read the first line, then she read it again, and somewhere behind her ribs, very quietly, something broke. The journal was lighter than it looked. That was the first thing Sarah noticed when Marcus slid it across the desk, that something capable of doing this much damage weighed almost nothing at all. She opened the first flagged page. Lily's handwriting was careful in the way it always got when she was concentrating. Slightly oversized letters. The pen pressed harder on the downstrokes. Sarah had watched her write like this 100 times. Homework, birthday cards, the thank you notes Evelyn had insisted she send after every visit. The entry was dated 9 weeks ago. "Grandma told me something today. She said Mommy doesn't really love me the way grandmas love. She said if Mommy loved me, she would be home more." Sarah read it twice. She kept her face exactly where it was. She turned the page. The next entry was 2 weeks later. Shorter. The handwriting was a little looser, like Lily had written it quickly, before she could think too long about it. "Grandma says Mommy only works so much because she doesn't like being home with me. She says that's just how some mommies are." Marcus was quiet on the other side of the desk. He had the particular stillness of someone who understood that the most useful thing he could offer right now was space. Sarah turned another page. "Grandma says I shouldn't be sad about it. She says she loves me the real way. She said one day I'll understand." She closed the journal slowly. Not because she had finished. Because she needed a moment before the next one. The real way. She sat with that phrase while the fluorescent light hummed above them and the school hallway carried the muffled noise of a day still finishing itself outside the door. She thought about the last 9 weeks. The way Lily had started coming home from Evelyn's quieter than she'd left. Not unhappy, just resettled somehow. Like she'd been reorganized while Sarah wasn't watching. She had told herself it was growth, the natural pulling away of a child becoming more her own person. She had been grateful for it even. One less thing to worry about. She looked up at Marcus. "Many entries?" she asked. Flagged. Across approximately 2 months. 2 months of Lily sitting in her grandmother's kitchen, writing down what she'd been told about her own mother. Writing it in the journal she kept because, as she'd explained to Sarah once with complete seriousness, it was where she put things that were real. Sarah set the journal on the edge of the desk. She didn't push it away. She didn't pull it closer. "Are there others?" she said. "Entries that weren't flagged?" Marcus looked at her steadily. "That's what I was hoping you could help me understand." She didn't go straight home. She drove for 20 minutes with no destination, taking turns she didn't need to take, passing the same gas station twice. Lily was at after-school care until 5. She had time. She wasn't sure what to do with it. When she finally sat down at the kitchen table, the house was still and the journal was in her bag and she didn't take it out. She didn't need to. She already knew what it said. What she needed to understand was how long she hadn't. She started 8 months back and worked forward slowly, the way she reviewed a project that had quietly gone wrong, looking not for the disaster, but for the moment before it. The moment she could have caught it if she'd been paying a different kind of attention. October. Lily had come home from a Sunday at Evelyn's and asked, with no context, whether their apartment was the smallest one Sarah could afford. Sarah had laughed it off. Kids absorbed things. Kids said strange things. She told Lily it was exactly the right size and moved on. She hadn't moved on. She had filed it away under nothing and kept going. November. Lily had pushed her dinner to the edge of her plate and said Grandma's chicken didn't have sauce from a jar. The words weren't cruel. Lily was 7. She didn't do cruel. But someone had handed her that sentence before she arrived at the table. Someone had taught her the comparison was worth making. Sarah had told herself it was a phase. December. The one that should have stopped her. Lily had been getting ready for bed, and Sarah had said, "I love you, bug," the way she said it every night without thinking, and Lily had paused a half-second pause that had no business being there before she said it back. Sarah had noticed it. She remembered noticing it. She had stood in the doorway of Lily's room and felt something shift, briefly, and then she had told herself she was tired and reading too much into a child's bedtime routine. She had been reading exactly the right amount into it. She just hadn't wanted to be. That was the part she kept returning to, sitting at the kitchen table in the quiet house. Not that she had missed the signs. She had seen them, each one individually. She had picked them up, examined them, found an explanation that cost her less than the truth, and put them back down. because the truth would have required her to look directly at Evelyn. At the woman she had thanked, consistently, for loving her daughter in the hours Sarah couldn't. She pressed her hands flat on the table. The question wasn't what Evelyn had been building inside Lily's mind over 8 months. The question was what had made her decide to start. The thing about Evelyn was that she wasn't wrong about everything. That was the part Sarah kept running into, no matter how many times she traced the edges of the last 8 months. Evelyn had been there, consistently, reliably, without being asked twice. When Sarah's project timelines pushed past 6 o'clock, Evelyn had already started dinner. When Lily had her first loose tooth and Sarah was in a conference call she couldn't leave, Evelyn had sat with her through the whole anxious afternoon, patient and unhurried, the way Sarah wished she could have been. She had been grateful for all of it. She had said so regularly and meant it. What she hadn't understood was that Evelyn was keeping score, not maliciously. That was the part that made it so difficult to hold in both hands at once. Evelyn wasn't cruel in the way that announced itself. She was cruel in the way that comes dressed as concern, as wisdom, as a grandmother's love for a child she believed was being quietly failed. Every meal she cooked in Sarah's place was, in her own internal ledger, evidence. Every school pickup Sarah missed was another entry in a case she had been building, probably without fully realizing it, for years. Evelyn had grown up in a world where a mother's worth was measured in presence. Physical, continuous, unhurried presence. By that standard, the only standard she had ever applied was that she was the better mother in that child's life. She had simply never questioned whether the standard itself was fair. And the longer Sarah thought about it, the more she understood that Evelyn hadn't set out to turn Lily against her. She had set out to show Lily what love looked like. The problem was the version she showed required Sarah to be its opposite. That was the distinction that kept Sarah awake, not malice. Certainty. There is something uniquely difficult about confronting a person who has caused real harm from a place of genuine belief. Anger is easier when the other person knows they're wrong. Evelyn didn't know. She would sit across any table, in any conversation, and explain with complete sincerity that everything she had done had been for Lily. And the painful truth was that from inside her own framework, she would not be lying. Sarah had managed difficult people her entire career. She knew how to navigate defensiveness, how to stay level when someone pushed back, how to hold her position without making it a battle. But those were professional skills, built for professional distance. She didn't know how to use them on the woman who had rocked her daughter to sleep. She looked at the clock. 9:15. Lily was already in bed, already breathing in the slow, even rhythm Sarah had checked twice. Tomorrow was Wednesday, Evelyn's standing coffee morning. She'd be home by 10. Sarah had not decided yet whether she was going to be there when she arrived. She was still deciding. She decided at 6 a.m. not dramatically. She didn't sit up in bed with sudden resolve. She simply woke, lay still for a moment listening to the apartment breathe around her, and understood that she was going. She dropped Lily at school, watched her walk through the double doors without looking back, and drove to Evelyn's house. The drive took 11 minutes. She used them to decide what she would not do. She would not raise her voice. She would not make accusations she couldn't support. She would not give Evelyn the version of this conversation where Sarah was the one who lost control. She parked. She sat for exactly 30 seconds. Then she got out. Evelyn answered the door in her housecoat, coffee in hand, the particular expression of someone interrupted mid-morning routine. Surprise first, then something more careful. Sarah, I wasn't expecting, I know. Sarah stepped inside. The kitchen smelled like it always did. Coffee and dish soap and the faint sweetness of the candle Evelyn kept on the windowsill. Sarah had stood in this kitchen 100 times. She had thanked Evelyn in this kitchen. She set the journal on the table, opened to the paperclip page, and took a step back. She didn't say anything. Evelyn looked at it. She set her coffee down slowly. She read. Her chin lifted by degrees, the way it did when she was organizing her response before she'd finished receiving the information. When she looked up, her eyes were steady. I only wanted her to understand. Understand what? Sarah asked, quietly, genuinely. That love takes time, that you can't. Evelyn stopped, recalibrated. You're never there, Sarah. I'm not saying that to hurt you. I'm saying it because it's true and someone has to. Sarah held her gaze and said nothing. The silence lasted longer than Evelyn expected. Sarah could see her recalibrating again, reaching for something with more weight. I love that child, Evelyn said, more than you know how to. Strange part was how certain she sounded. Not cruel, certain. As though she had arrived at this conclusion through careful, patient reasoning and was simply reporting the result. Sarah picked up the journal. "This is the last time Lily comes here without me present." She said it the way she said difficult things at work. Level. Finished. Not a door left open for negotiation. Evelyn's mouth opened slightly. A response formed and didn't make it out. Sarah walked past her through the hallway and out the front door. She didn't slam it. She pulled it shut behind her with a quiet click that felt, in the moment, like the most deliberate sound she had ever made. She sat in the car, hands on the wheel, engine off. The conversation lasted less than 4 minutes. She already knew it wasn't over. What she didn't know yet was how many people Evelyn would call before noon. The first call came Thursday morning. Evelyn's sister, Patricia. A woman Sarah had seen perhaps a dozen times in 8 years, mostly at Christmas, mostly across a table too large for honest conversation. Her voice was warm in the careful way of someone delivering a prepared message. "Sarah, I just want to check in. Evelyn is very upset. I imagine she is. Feels like you've taken something from her, without really hearing her side." Sarah was at her desk. She had 15 minutes before her first meeting. She looked at the wall in front of her and kept her voice completely even. "I heard everything she said, Patricia. I was there." A pause, the kind that meant the conversation had not gone in the expected direction. "She loves that little girl." "I know she does. My decision stands." She ended the call. She sat with the phone in her hand for a moment. Then she put it face down and opened her laptop. The second call was a family friend she recognized by name only as someone from Evelyn's church circle, a woman who had no relationship with Lily whatsoever, who began the conversation with "I've known Evelyn for 30 years," as though duration were evidence. Sarah let her finish. Then she said, "Thank you for calling," and hung up. The third call was her father, that one she felt. He didn't open with Evelyn's name. He opened with hers. "How are you doing, sweetheart?" The old warmth of it completely genuine, which made what followed worse. "Been hearing some things. I just want to make sure everyone's okay." "Have you been hearing them from?" A beat. "Evelyn reached out. She's worried about Lily, about the situation." Sarah closed her eyes briefly. I opened them. "Dad, did she tell you what was in the journal?" She mentioned there was some kind of misunderstanding. It wasn't a misunderstanding. Lily's school counselor flagged the entries. I read them myself. There was nothing to misinterpret. Silence. The particular silence of a man who cares about his daughter but has already been given a story and is now being asked to hold 2 versions at once. "Just don't want to see the family." "I know you don't." She said it gently, genuinely. "Neither do I, but my decision is made, and it isn't going to change because people are uncomfortable." He didn't push further. That was the thing about her father. He knew where the line was, even when he couldn't quite see it from where he was standing. After she hung up, she counted. 3 calls in 36 hours. Not one of them had asked how Lily was doing. Not one. She thought about that for a long time. The family had mobilized with speed and conviction around a version of events none of them had witnessed, in defense of a woman who had never once been asked to defend herself by any of them. That wasn't loyalty. That was a reflex. And Sarah was no longer willing to be managed by other people's reflexes. She picked her phone back up. Scrolled to a number she hadn't called in 2 months. Lily's father answered on the second ring. It came out on a Saturday afternoon. They were on the living room floor with a half-finished puzzle between them. One of Lily's, a map of the world with oversized countries in primary colors. Lily had been quiet in the particular way she'd been quiet for months. Present but slightly behind glass. Close enough to touch, just out of reach. Sarah had been waiting for the right moment. She had decided there wasn't one. There was only now, and the floor and the puzzle and her daughter sitting 3 feet away carrying something she shouldn't have to carry alone. "Can I ask you something?" Sarah said. Lily looked up. That familiar flicker of assessment, the brief scan before she committed to an expression. "Okay. There anything you've wanted to tell me but didn't? You won't be in trouble. I promise." Lily looked back down at the puzzle. She turned a piece over in her fingers without placing it. "Grandma said you feel guilty," she said finally, "because you know you don't try hard enough." Sarah kept very still. She said that to you? Lily nodded, eyes on the puzzle. She said it wasn't my fault, that some mommies are just that way. The words were Evelyn's. Sarah could hear her cadence in them, the careful, reasonable tone of someone delivering uncomfortable facts for a child's own good. She breathed in slowly through her nose, said nothing yet. She showed me pictures once, Lily continued. Quieter now, like she was moving toward something and wasn't sure she should. Of other families where the moms were always home after school. She paused. She said she just wanted me to know what it could look like. Strange part wasn't the anger Sarah felt. It was cold and clear, not a wave, a current, something that had direction. She waited until she was certain her voice would come out the way she needed it to. Lily, look at me. Lily looked up. None of that is true. She said it without urgency. Without the trembling intensity that would have made Lily feel responsible for managing her mother's emotions. Steady, direct. Not a single part of it, you understand. Lily held her gaze for a moment, then gave a small, uncertain nod. And I need you to hear this part especially. Sarah leaned forward slightly. You can tell me anything. You will not make me angry. You will not hurt my feelings. You will not lose me for being honest. Not ever. Something shifted in Lily's face. Subtle. The faintest softening around her eyes, as though a small weight had been quietly set down. She didn't say anything. She just leaned sideways until her shoulder was resting against Sarah's arm. They stayed like that. The puzzle is unfinished between them. Sarah stared at the oversized map of the world and thought about how long it takes to undo something that has been done slowly. How patience isn't always gentle. How it sometimes just looks like sitting on a floor, holding still, and not letting go. She didn't know yet how long the road back would be. She only knew she was on it. She didn't make a list. She wasn't that kind of person anymore. The version of Sarah who managed everything through bullet points and color-coded calendars had spent 2 years believing that if she organized life precisely enough, it would hold its shape. It hadn't, so she started differently this time. She started by sitting with her work calendar open and blocking 4 evenings a week: Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, 5 o'clock, hard stop, and then she closed the laptop before she could talk herself out of it. The professional friction arrived within 48 hours. Her manager, to his credit, didn't push back directly. He simply went quiet in a way that communicated everything. She let the quiet sit. She had learned recently that she didn't have to fill every uncomfortable silence with reassurance. She called Marcus Vance on a Monday morning and arranged a standing session for Lily. Weekly. He asked thoughtful questions and took careful notes, and at the end of the call said, "You're doing the right thing." She thanked him. She didn't need him to say it, but she was human enough to be glad he had. The call to Lily's father was harder, not because he was difficult, he wasn't. He listened without interrupting, asked 2 clarifying questions, and by the end had said everything that needed to be said with the particular decency of someone who understood that his primary job in this moment was not to have an opinion, but to show up. She hadn't expected to feel grateful for that. She did. The last call was to Evelyn. She made it on a Wednesday evening after Lily was in bed. She sat at the kitchen table with a glass of water and dialed before the weight of it could accumulate any further. Evelyn answered on the 3rd ring. Her voice was guarded, expectant. Sarah didn't offer a greeting beyond her name. She said, "I want you to know you're still welcome in Lily's life. That's not what this is about." Silence. "But going forward, visits happen when I'm present. We agree on the timing in advance, and the conversations you have with Lily about me stop completely." She said it the way she'd say anything that wasn't open for discussion. Not cold, not performative, just finished. The silence on Evelyn's end stretched long enough that Sarah counted it. 7 seconds, 8. "Punishing me," Evelyn said finally. "I'm protecting my daughter." Another silence. Different in quality from the first. Something moving through it that Sarah couldn't quite name. Not guilt, not quite defeat. Something older and more complicated than either. She didn't wait for a response that would reopen the conversation. She said good night and ended the call. She sat for a moment in the quiet kitchen. The apartment around her felt different than it had a week ago. Not lighter, exactly. Cleaner, like a room where the windows had finally been opened. What she didn't know, what she had no way of knowing yet, was whether Evelyn would honor it, or whether this was simply the beginning of a longer battle she hadn't fully seen yet. The change didn't arrive all at once. That was the thing nobody told you about healing, that it didn't look like anything from the outside. There was no morning where Lily woke up differently. No single conversation that closed the wound cleanly. It happened the way most real things happen, gradually, unevenly, in increments too small to name while they were occurring. Sarah noticed it first at dinner. Lily had started talking again. Not the careful, edited version of talking she'd been doing for months. The responses calibrated for safety. The sentences that answered the question without revealing anything behind it. Real talk. About a girl in her class who pronounced crayons wrong and refused to be corrected about it. About a dream she'd had involving a penguin in a shopping mall. Small, unguarded things. The kind that only comes out when a child feels certain they won't be used against them. Sarah listened to every word. She didn't rush any of it. The face scanning had stopped too. That small, pre-committed assessment Lily used to perform before she allowed herself an expression, reading the room before she decided how to inhabit it. Gone, or almost gone. There were still moments, but they were becoming fewer, and each one that passed without happening felt like something quietly restored. The question about Evelyn came on a Tuesday evening in November. Lily asked it the way she asked most hard things now, directly, without the old anxious preamble. Just, "Am I going to see Grandma Evelyn again?" Sarah set down what she was doing. She looked at her daughter. "Yes," she said. "She loves you. That part was always real." Lily considered this. But she said things that weren't true. Did grown-ups sometimes cause real harm even when they love someone? Those two things can both be true at the same time. Lily nodded slowly, processing it the way she processed most information, thoroughly, without rushing. Then she picked up her crayon and went back to her drawing. That was it. No tears, no dramatic reckoning. Just a child absorbing a complicated truth and deciding she could hold it without breaking. Sarah sat at the kitchen table and watched the crayon move across the paper in Lily's careful, slightly oversized strokes. The apartment was quiet. Outside, the evening traffic moved in its ordinary rhythm, indifferent and continuous. She thought about the pale yellow journal in her bedside drawer. She hadn't thrown it away. She didn't know yet if she ever would. It was evidence of something, and she had learned too slowly, but finally that evidence deserved to be kept. She thought about the version of herself from 4 months ago. The woman who drove home from school in a different direction every time because she didn't know where to put what she was carrying. Who explained away what she should have examined. Who kept the peace until the peace became the problem. She didn't feel angry at that woman anymore. She just didn't intend to be her again. Lily looked up briefly. Smiled at nothing in particular. I looked back down. It was such a small thing. It was the whole thing. Don't forget to subscribe to the Life Chronicles for more powerful, real-life dramas every single week. Thank you for watching.